The desperate call. The emergency lights of the Ceronian command carrier, Eternal Dawn, cast harsh crimson shadows across the war room. Admiral Thelos stood before the tactical display, his forearms gripping the edge of the table as the holographic projection showed yet another system falling to the Voidborn Collective. The violet dots representing Ceronian defense platforms winked out one by one, replaced by the sickly green markers of Voidborn high ships. "Praxis system has fallen," reported Commander Lavina, her voice steady despite the tremor in her secondary limbs. "Refugee transports made it out, but we lost the colony. 80 million souls." Thelos closed his 8 eyes momentarily, allowing himself a single second of grief before snapping back to the reality of their situation. "The Voidborn are advancing faster than we predicted. At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds within 3 cycles." The Ceronian Alliance had fought the Voidborn Collective for nearly a decade. What began as skirmishes along the outer rim had escalated into full-scale genocide. The Voidborn, a hive consciousness of biomechanical entities, consumed everything in their path: resources, technology, and genetic material. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They simply expanded. "Our latest countermeasures?" Thelos asked, though he already knew the answer. Science Director Mavis stepped forward, her exoskeleton clicking against the polished floor. "Ineffective, Admiral. The Voidborn adapted to our phase-shift torpedoes within hours. They're learning at an exponential rate." The room fell silent. The Ceronian Alliance had once been the technological marvel of the Galactic Arm. Their crystalline ships and quantum weaponry had kept peace for thousands of years. Now they were being systematically dismantled by an enemy that treated their greatest achievements as mere stepping stones in its own evolution. "We've exhausted every military option," said Lavina. "The remaining allied species are withdrawing their support. They believe the Alliance is doomed." "And they may be right," Thelos admitted. "But I refuse to accept extinction without exploring every possibility." He turned to the oldest member of his council, Archivist Valen, who had remained silent throughout the meeting. "You mentioned something earlier, a last resort." The ancient Ceronian shuffled forward, his withered limbs trembling slightly. Age had dulled the luster of his chitinous exoskeleton, but his eyes remained sharp. "It's not a tactical option, Admiral. Merely a historical curiosity. We're beyond the luxury of dismissing curiosities. Archivist, tell us." Valen gestured with his upper arms, and a new hologram replaced the tactical display. It showed an unfamiliar sector of space, far beyond the boundaries of known territory. 800 years ago, the Ceronian Alliance was considerably smaller. We were engaged in a war with the now extinct Myriad Dominion. Our ancestors faced annihilation, much as we do now. The hologram shifted, showing ancient space battles with primitive ships. According to records from that era, our ancestors encountered a species they had never seen before, beings who called themselves humans. Humans? Lavina repeated the unfamiliar word. "I've never heard of them." "Few have," Valen continued. "They appeared suddenly, without warning, intervened in the conflict, and then disappeared just as mysteriously. The records state that their technology was unlike anything seen before or since. They left behind only a communication frequency and a message. Call when there is no other choice." Thelos stared at the hologram, studying the strange alien ships. "And our ancestors never used this frequency. The crisis passed. The Alliance recovered and expanded. The frequency was filed away as a historical oddity, mentioned only in our deepest archives." Valen's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Until now." Mavis scoffed, her scientific mind rejecting such a tenuous hope. "You propose to send a distress call to a possibly extinct species based on an 800-year-old legend. I propose we explore every option before accepting our extinction," Thelos replied. He turned to Valen. "Do we have this frequency?" The archivist nodded, producing a small crystalline data core from within his robes. It's never been purged from our databases. I verified it myself. This is madness, Mavis protested. Even if these humans existed, even if they're still monitoring this frequency after 8 centuries, why would they help us? Thelos took the data core, examining its ancient construction. Because we have nothing else. He inserted it into the command console. Prepare a distress call. Include all data on the Voidborn, our defensive capabilities, and projected time until extinction. Let's see if the legends are true. Hours later, the message was sent, broadcast on a frequency that hadn't been used for centuries, directed toward a sector of space where no known civilization existed. The Ceronians continued their preparations for the inevitable Voidborn assault, not daring to hope for a response. 3 days passed. The command carrier relocated twice to avoid detection. Voidborn scouts were reported in increasing numbers near the Alliance's core worlds. The silence from the ancient frequency remained unbroken. On the 4th day, as Thelos was reviewing evacuation protocols for the civilian populations, Lavina burst onto the command deck, her exoskeleton flushed with the biochemical indicators of extreme excitement. "Admiral, we've received a response." Thelos froze. "From the frequency. The humans." "Yes, sir. Audio only, in ancient Ceronian dialect." She activated her communication implant, and a voice filled the command deck. Calm, measured, and utterly alien. Ceronian distress signal received. Situation analyzed. Assistance incoming. Prepare for arrival. The message was brief, direct, and offered no room for reply. It confirmed nothing about the sender's identity, their intentions, or their capabilities. Yet, despite its brevity, it sent ripples of both hope and apprehension throughout the command deck. "How soon can they arrive?" Thelos asked, trying to maintain a pragmatic outlook. "The nearest system is at least 16 light cycles away." Valen shook his head. The records weren't specific about their propulsion technology, only that they appeared without warning. As if to answer his question, the ship's sensors suddenly blared to life. Mavis rushed to the detection array, her limbs moving in a blur across the controls. Massive spatial distortion detected at the edge of the system. Nothing in our database matches this signature. The main view screen shifted to show the empty void of space at the system's periphery. For a moment, there was nothing but stars against the blackness. Then, space itself seemed to fold. There was no flash of light, no dramatic entrance, merely a sudden presence where before there had been nothing. 3 ships hung in the void, their design unlike anything in the Alliance's records. They were sleek, almost organic in their contours, yet bristling with structures that defied conventional engineering principles. They were massive, each easily dwarfing the eternal dawn. And they sat motionless, as if they had always been there, waiting to be noticed. "By the first light," whispered Lavina. The communication system activated again, the same calm voice now speaking in perfect modern Ceronian. "This is the Earth vessel Harbinger. We received your distress call. We've analyzed your situation with the entities you call the Voidborn Collective. We've come to help." Thelos found his voice, though it sounded strange even to his own ears. "This is Admiral Thelos of the Ceronian Alliance. We thank you for responding. May I ask how you traveled here so quickly?" The pause. "Then, your understanding of physics is incomplete. We will share what we can when time permits." Mavis's instruments continued to analyze the vessels, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock. "Admiral, I'm not detecting any conventional energy signatures. No reaction drives, no fusion cores. I can't even determine what they're made of. Our sensors can't penetrate their hulls." Thelos straightened his posture, suddenly aware that he was facing something far beyond his experience. "We are grateful for your assistance, Harbinger, but the Voidborn Collective has resisted all our technologies. They adapt quickly to any weapon we deploy." "Yes," came the reply. "We've reviewed your tactical data. Your approaches have been predictable. The Voidborn exploit pattern recognition. We do not operate on patterns they would recognize. Before Thalos could respond, Lavina interrupted. Admiral, emergency transmission from Proxima Station. The Voidborn main fleet has arrived. They're launching an all-out assault. The tactical display flared with activity as dozens of Voidborn high ships descended upon the Ceronian defensive line. The last major barrier before the core worlds was under attack. Thalos turned back to the communication channel. The Voidborn main assault has begun. Our fleets are engaging, but they cannot hold for long. We understand, replied the Harbinger. We will proceed to the engagement zone. You may observe if you wish. It would be educational. With that simple statement, the 3 human vessels began to move. There was no visible propulsion, no energy wake. They simply accelerated at a rate that should have turned any crew to liquid. In seconds, they vanished from sensors. Follow them, ordered Thalos. Maximum sustainable speed. The eternal dawn surged forward, its crystalline drives pushing to their limits. Even so, it took nearly an hour to reach the Proxima defensive line. By the time they arrived, Thalos expected to find the battle well underway, perhaps with the human vessels engaged against the Voidborn fleet. What they found instead was silence. The space around Proxima Station was filled with debris, the unmistakable remains of Voidborn high ships. Hundreds of them, shattered and drifting. Among the wreckage, the 3 human vessels waited, apparently undamaged. Sensors confirm 47 Voidborn capital ships destroyed, reported Mavis, her voice hollow with disbelief. No survivors detected. The entire Voidborn main fleet eliminated. The communication channel opened once more. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We will now address the remaining Voidborn outposts in your territory. Prepare your diplomatic corps. When our work is complete, we will need to talk. As the human vessels moved away once more, the command deck of the Eternal Dawn remained silent. The impossible had happened. A legend had answered their call, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Silent Watchers, 800 light-years from the Ceronian Alliance, on a planet deliberately obscured from galactic charts. Strategic Director Helena Chen stared at the holographic projection of the Voidborn engagement. The command center of Earth's Defensive Directorate was silent as the officers watched the footage relayed from the Harbinger. Engagement complete, reported the AI interface. Voidborn primary consciousness nodes identified and neutralized. Collective neural architecture disrupted. High ships rendered inoperative. 0 casualties sustained. Helena nodded, her expression impassive. Time to complete the operation. 4 minutes, 27 seconds from initial engagement to neutralization, the AI responded. A low whistle came from Admiral Jackson, standing at her side. Faster than the simulations predicted. The countermeasures worked perfectly. They should have, Helena replied. We've been studying the Voidborn for over a century. Their appearance in Ceronian space wasn't unexpected. This was humanity's way now, watching, studying, preparing, all from the shadows of their self-imposed exile. 800 years ago, the United Earth Coalition had made the difficult decision to withdraw from galactic affairs. Their first forays into interstellar politics had proven disastrous, not because humanity was weak, but because they were too strong, too adaptable, too unpredictable. Their presence destabilized delicate balances of power that had existed for millennia. The final straw came when a minor intervention in the Ceronian Myriad conflict escalated into a war that annihilated the Myriad Dominion entirely. Humanity hadn't intended genocide. They had simply underestimated the impact of their technology and tactics in the hands of their allies. Horrified by what they had enabled, Earth's leadership made a choice: withdrawal, isolation, and a vow to watch rather than interfere. Yet they never stopped observing. Stealth outposts throughout the galaxy monitored developments, collected data, and tracked emerging threats. Earth's technology continued to advance at an exponential rate, unhindered by the need to share or trade with other species. When truly existential threats emerged, like the Voidborn, contingency plans were developed, but never implemented. Until now. "The Council is assembled," announced the AI. "They're waiting for your assessment." Helena straightened her uniform and turned toward the adjacent chamber where the Intervention Council waited, composed of the highest-ranking military, scientific, and ethical authorities on Earth. They alone held the power to authorize breaking humanity's isolation. As she entered, 20 faces turned toward her, some present physically, others as holographic projections from colonies throughout Earth's hidden sphere of influence. At the center sat High Counselor Takashi Yamamoto, his aged face solemn. "Director Chen," he acknowledged, "I understand the initial intervention was successful." "Yes, Counselor. The Harbinger Battle Group eliminated the immediate Voidborn threat. Fleet Admiral Rice is coordinating the neutralization of remaining Voidborn outposts in Ceronian space." And the Ceronians' reaction. Helena allowed herself a small smile. Shock would be an understatement. They had no concept of what they were actually calling upon. Dr. Ileana Santos, head of xenoanthropology, leaned forward. "We knew this day would come eventually. The emergency protocols we left with various species were always going to be activated when they faced extinction. The question is, what happens now?" The room fell silent. This was the real challenge. After 8 centuries of isolation, humanity was faced with a momentous decision. Their brief appearance would irreversibly alter the galactic landscape. The Ceronians had seen what human technology could do. They wouldn't simply thank their saviors and let them disappear again. "We have 3 options," Helena said, bringing up a holographic display of her own. "First, we complete the Voidborn neutralization and withdraw, again, refusing further contact. This option is problematic. The Ceronians have already scanned our ships, and while they can't understand what they're seeing, they now know we exist and what we're capable of. Second option, limited engagement. We establish diplomatic relations with the Ceronian Alliance only, offering them specific technological packages to help them rebuild, but maintaining our isolation from the broader galactic community." "And the third option?" prompted Yamamoto. Helena took a deep breath. "We end our isolation entirely. We return to galactic affairs as active participants, not just silent watchers." The council chamber erupted in heated debate. For centuries, humanity had built its identity around non-interference. Their observation networks had allowed them to avoid countless potential conflicts. Their advanced technology had developed without the constraints of compatibility with alien systems. They had become something fundamentally different from the species that had first ventured beyond their solar system. "The galaxy isn't ready for us," argued Defense Minister Rivera. "Our technology, our AI systems, our quantum manipulation capabilities, these would destabilize every existing power structure. The galaxy will never be ready for us," countered Dr. Santos. "That's precisely why we withdrew. But isolation has consequences too. We've watched species suffer and die when we could have helped. The Ceronians aren't the first to face extinction. They're just the first who knew to call us." Admiral Jackson stepped forward. "There's another factor to consider. The Voidborn won't be the last existential threat to emerge. Our models show at least 3 other potential threats developing in various parts of the galaxy. We can keep watching, keep waiting until each becomes critical, or we can take a more proactive approach." Yamamoto raised a hand, silencing the debate. "What do the Ceronians want? Have they made any specific requests beyond the elimination of the Voidborn?" "Not yet," Helena replied. "But they will. Admiral Thelos is no fool. He's already witnessed what we can do. He'll want protection against future threats, technological exchanges, perhaps even military alliances." The High Counselor nodded slowly. "Then perhaps we should hear what they have to say before we decide our course." He turned to address the entire council. "I propose we authorize a diplomatic mission. Director Chen will speak with the Ceronian leadership and assess their intentions. Based on her report, we will determine our next steps. The vote was not unanimous, but the majority supported Yamamoto's proposal. As the council adjourned, Helena found herself standing alone with the High Counselor. 800 years is a long time to hide, Director, Yamamoto said quietly. Perhaps too long. Helena considered this. You believe it's time to return. I believe isolation has served its purpose. We withdrew to protect the galaxy from ourselves. In doing so, we've become something else entirely. The old man's eyes showed the wisdom of his century-long life. The question is not whether the galaxy is ready for us. It's whether we are ready for the galaxy. Aboard the Harbinger, Fleet Admiral Reyes received the Council's decision with a grim nod. As the most advanced vessel in Earth's fleet, the Harbinger would serve as the setting for humanity's first official diplomatic contact in 8 centuries. Prepare the reception area, he ordered his crew, and inform Admiral Thelos that we are ready to receive him and his diplomatic team. The shuttle from the Eternal Dawn approached cautiously, its crystalline hull reflecting the stars. Inside, Thelos, Mavis, and Valen sat in tense silence. None of them had expected to find themselves in this position, guests aboard a vessel belonging to a species thought to be merely legend. As they docked with the massive human ship, Thelos turned to his companions. Remember, we represent not just the Ceronian Alliance, but potentially the entire galactic community. These humans have power beyond our comprehension. We must proceed with both gratitude and caution. The airlock cycled open, revealing a corridor unlike anything they had seen before. The interior of the Harbinger seemed to shift subtly as they watched, the walls flowing like liquid metal before settling into configurations better suited to Ceronian physiology. The ship is reconfiguring itself, Mavis whispered, her scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming her apprehension. Adaptive architecture. A human stepped forward to greet them, a female, by their best assessment, with dark skin and close-cropped hair. She wore a uniform of deep blue with silver insignia that seemed to move and change when not directly observed. Admiral Thelos, she said in perfect Ceronian, without any translation device visible. I am Director Helena Chen of Earth's Defensive Directorate. Welcome aboard the Harbinger. Thelos performed the traditional Ceronian greeting, all 4 arms extended in a gesture of peaceful intent. Director Chen, we bring the gratitude of the Ceronian people. Your intervention has saved billions of lives. Please follow me, Helena said, gesturing down the corridor. There is much to discuss. As they walked, Mavis couldn't contain her curiosity. Your ships, they operate on principles we can't even detect, let alone understand. May I ask how you've achieved such advancement? Helena smiled slightly. 800 years of uninterrupted development, focused primarily on defense and observation technology. We prioritize differently than most species. You've been watching us, Valen said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Helena met the old archivist's gaze directly. Yes, we've maintained observation outposts throughout the galaxy since our withdrawal. We monitor potential threats, track technological developments, and study cultural evolution. Yet you never intervened, Thelos noted. Until now. They entered a chamber that opened into a vast space, with one wall entirely transparent, offering a spectacular view of the stars and the distant shape of the Eternal Dawn. A table formed from the floor as they watched, along with chairs suited to Ceronian physiology. Please be seated, Helena said, taking her own place at the table. To answer your implied question, Admiral, intervention carries consequences. 8 centuries ago, we learned that lesson at great cost. The Myriad Dominion was annihilated because we underestimated the impact of our involvement. Valen's eyes widened. You were responsible for the Myriad extinction. Not directly, Helena clarified. We provided the Ceronians with certain technologies, believing they would be used for defensive purposes only. The result was more devastating than anticipated. After that, We chose isolation and observation over direct involvement. Thelos processed this revelation carefully, yet you kept channels open. The frequency we used to contact you. Contingencies, Helena acknowledged. For truly existential threats, the Voidborn qualified. Mavis leaned forward, her scientific mind racing. You've eliminated the immediate Voidborn presence, but their hive extends across multiple sectors. They will return, perhaps adapted to whatever you used against them. Helena's expression remained calm. No, they won't. The Voidborn operate on a centralized consciousness architecture. We didn't just destroy their ships, we severed the links between their distributed neural networks and collapsed their collective intelligence. The remaining Voidborn units are already non-functional. The Ceronians exchanged glances of astonishment. The Voidborn, the terror that had nearly destroyed their civilization, had been completely neutralized in a matter of hours. So what happens now? Thelos asked, voicing the question that hung between them. Do you simply disappear again? Return to watching from the shadows. Helena placed her hands flat on the table, a deliberate gesture of openness. That is one possibility. But after 800 years of isolation, many on Earth believe it may be time for a different approach. She looked directly at Thelos. The real question, Admiral, is what do the Ceronians want from this encounter? First contact renewed. Admiral Thelos felt the weight of Helena's question, and the immense responsibility it represented. The next words from his mouth would shape not just the future of the Ceronian alliance, but potentially the entire galactic community. Director Chen, he began carefully, the Ceronian alliance has always valued knowledge and cooperation. We would be dishonest if we claimed no interest in your technology. What we've witnessed is centuries beyond our capabilities. But more than that, we seek understanding. Mavis nodded in agreement. You've observed us for centuries, studied our development from afar. The knowledge imbalance between our civilizations is profound. We know nothing of your culture, your ethics, your history beyond ancient legends. Fair points, Helena acknowledged. Perhaps we should start with what you've already seen. She made a subtle gesture, and a holographic display appeared above the table, showing the engagement with the Voidborn fleet. The weapons we used against the Voidborn were specifically designed to target their unique biology and consciousness structure. They wouldn't be effective against other species. That's somewhat reassuring, Thelos said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Helena smiled slightly. You're concerned about the power difference between us. That's wise. It's precisely why we withdrew centuries ago. Our presence destabilized existing power structures. Valen, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. Yet isolation has consequences too. While you watched, species have risen and fallen. Wars have been fought. The Voidborn nearly consumed us entirely. Yes, Helena admitted. And that has been the ongoing debate among our leadership. The ethics of non-intervention when we have the power to help. It's complicated. All meaningful things are, Valen replied. A subtle chime sounded, and Helena glanced at a display only she could see. The rest of the Voidborn outposts have been neutralized. Your space is now secure. Thelos straightened, making a decision. Then perhaps it's time we spoke more officially. The Ceronian Grand Council should be part of this discussion. Would you be willing to send representatives to our homeworld? Helena considered this for a moment. That would be a significant step, the first official human delegation to an alien world in 8 centuries. She nodded slowly. I believe we can accommodate this request. It would give us an opportunity to better understand your people as well. And after that? Mavis asked. Will you disappear again? Or is this the beginning of a new relationship between our species? That, Helena said, is yet to be determined. But I believe we've maintained our isolation long enough. It's time for humanity to rejoin the galactic community, cautiously, and on terms that protect both your civilizations and ours. The journey to Ceronia Prime took mere hours aboard the human diplomatic vessel. Unlike the massive Harbinger, this ship was smaller, designed specifically for diplomatic missions, though still featuring technology that defied Ceronian understanding. As they approached the jewel-like world that served as the capital of the Ceronian Alliance, Helena stood on the bridge, watching the planet grow larger in the viewscreen. Beside her, Admiral Jackson observed the defensive grid surrounding the planet, now mostly symbolic after the Voidborn threat had been eliminated. Their defensive capabilities are primitive, he noted quietly. Even before the Voidborn, they would have been vulnerable to numerous potential threats, which they survived without our intervention, Helena reminded him. Species develop at their own pace, Admiral. Our interference hasn't always been beneficial, and yet here we are, interfering again. Helena shook her head. Responding to a direct request for help is hardly interference. Besides, the Council has made its decision. We're here to explore the possibility of limited re-engagement with galactic affairs. As they entered orbit, a transmission came through from the surface. Thelos appeared on screen, now dressed in formal Ceronian attire that emphasized his rank. Director Chen, welcome to Ceronia Prime. The Grand Council awaits your arrival. Your landing coordinates have been transmitted. The descent to the planet's surface was smooth and controlled. As the diplomatic vessel settled onto the landing platform in the heart of the Ceronian capital, Helena and her team prepared to make history, the first humans to set foot on an alien world in nearly a millennium. The reception that awaited them was overwhelming. Thousands of Ceronians lined the processional way from the landing platform to the Grand Council chambers. News of the humans' intervention against the Voidborn had spread rapidly, and to the Ceronian public, these visitors weren't just allies. They were saviors. They're treating us like gods, muttered Dr. Santos, walking beside Helena. This is precisely what we wanted to avoid. We knew this would happen, Helena replied quietly. We'll need to address it directly with their leadership. The Grand Council chamber was a vast, crystalline dome, with hundreds of Ceronian representatives arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. As Helena and her team entered, a hush fell over the assembly. High Counselor Arava, the elected leader of the Ceronian Alliance, stepped forward to greet them. Unlike Thelos, Arava was from an older generation, his exoskeleton bearing the distinct patterns of a veteran of previous conflicts. Director Chen, he said, his voice amplified throughout the chamber, on behalf of all Ceronian people, and indeed all species of the Alliance, I welcome you to our homeworld. Your intervention has saved our civilization from extinction, and for that, we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Helena stepped onto the speaking platform, aware that her words would be transmitted to billions across the Alliance. High Counselor, esteemed members of the Grand Council, citizens of the Ceronian Alliance, we accept your welcome, but we reject the concept of debt. We responded to your call because it was the right thing to do, not to establish obligation. A murmur ran through the assembly at her directness. 800 years ago, humanity withdrew from galactic affairs because our presence caused unintended harm. We chose to watch rather than participate, to learn rather than teach. She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. That policy had merits, but it also had costs. The Voidborn threat might have been identified and neutralized earlier had we maintained more direct contact. Arava tilted his head, a gesture of curiosity in Ceronian body language. Are you suggesting that humanity wishes to return to galactic affairs? In a limited capacity, yes, Helena confirmed. We propose a new relationship, not as saviors or superiors, but as partners. There are threats in this galaxy that affect us all. The Voidborn were merely one manifestation. The chamber erupted in excited discussion. After a moment, Arava raised all four arms, calling for silence. This is a momentous development. Director Chen, the Grand Council would be honored to discuss the terms of this new relationship. But first, I believe our people deserve to know more about humanity. For centuries, you have watched us. Now, we wish to understand you. Helena nodded. A fair request. I am authorized to share information about Earth and human civilization, within certain limitations. For the next several hours, Helena and her team answered questions from the Grand Council. They explained the basics of human biology, their governmental structure, and provided a sanitized overview of Earth's history. They deliberately avoided technical details about their most advanced technologies, focusing instead on cultural and philosophical aspects of human society. As the session neared its conclusion, a Ceronian representative from an outer colony rose to speak. Director Chen, while we appreciate your openness, there is an essential question that remains unanswered. Why should we trust humanity? You've admitted to watching us for centuries without our knowledge. You possess technology that could easily dominate our civilization. What assurances can you offer that this partnership won't simply become another form of control? The chamber fell silent, the question giving voice to an underlying anxiety that many felt but few had dared express. Helena considered her response carefully. I can't offer absolute assurances. Trust must be earned through actions, not words. What I can tell you is this. Humanity has had the capability to dominate the galaxy for centuries. We chose isolation instead. Our return now is not driven by ambition or the desire for control, but by the recognition that isolation has consequences too. She stepped forward, her expression earnest. We don't seek to control your development or dictate your policies. We propose information sharing, mutual defense against existential threats, and cultural exchange. Nothing more. The terms of any agreement would be negotiated as equals, with full transparency. Irava studied her for a long moment before speaking. These are matters that require careful consideration. I propose that we adjourn for today and reconvene tomorrow to begin more specific discussions. As the session concluded, Thelos approached Helena privately. That went better than I expected, he said. Though I sense there's much you're still not sharing. Helena nodded. Some technologies aren't ready to be shared, not because we wish to maintain superiority, but because their introduction without proper context could be dangerous. Like what you gave us 800 years ago, Thelos observed. Precisely. Helena looked out over the Ceronian capital, its crystalline spires catching the light of the setting sun. We're trying to learn from our mistakes, Admiral. I hope your people will give us the opportunity to do so. That night, as the human delegation rested in their assigned quarters, a message arrived from Earth, Priority 1, directly from High Counselor Yamamoto. Director Chen. The message began. Our deep space monitoring network has detected an anomaly in Sector 371, near the former Voidborn territory. Initial analysis suggests it may be related to the Voidborn collective consciousness, but with a significant deviation from previously observed patterns. Investigate at your discretion, but be advised. This may impact your diplomatic mission. Helena shared the message with Admiral Jackson, who frowned deeply. Sector 371 is less than a day's journey from here, he noted. If there's a Voidborn remnant active in that region, then our assurances to the Ceronians may have been premature, Helena finished. We need to investigate this immediately. What about the diplomatic talks? Helena considered this. We'll need to be transparent. I'll inform Thelos and request a brief delay in tomorrow's session. When Thelos received the news, his reaction was immediate concern. You believe some Voidborn may have survived your attack. It's unlikely, Helena assured him. But we need to verify. Would you like to accompany us? It would demonstrate our commitment to transparency. Thelos agreed without hesitation. Within hours, a small human vessel with Thelos aboard departed for Sector 371. The journey took less than a day using the humans' advanced propulsion technology.